Hi everyone. I hope everyone's having a beautiful day in the Lord. I have an article here that I want to read to you. It was put out by National Geographic on July 3rd, 2019. And it's called, it's under their culture title, and it's Ancient DNA May Reveal Origin of the Philistines. I thought this article was very interesting, and I wanted to read it to you. It says, historical accounts and archaeology agree that the biggest villains of the Hebrew Bible were, quotes, different. But how different were they really? The first ever study of DNA recovered from an ancient Philistine site is providing a very unique genetic insight into the origins of some of the most notorious troublemakers of the Old Testament. The authors of the Hebrew Bible made it clear that the Philistines were not like them. This, quote, uncircumcised, unquote, group is described in several passages as coming from the land of Caphtor, which is modern-day Crete, before taking control of the coastal region of what is now southern Israel and the Gaza Strip. They warred with their Israelite neighbors, even seizing the Ark of the Covenant for a time. Their representatives in the Bible include the giant Goliath, who was felled by the future King David and Delilah, who robbed the Israelite Samson of his strength by cutting his hair. Modern archaeologists agree that the Philistines were different from their neighbors. Their arrival on the eastern shores of the Mediterranean in the early 12th century BC is marked by pottery with close parallels to the ancient Greek world, the use of an Aegean instead of Semitic script, and the consumption of pork. Many researchers also tie the presence of the Philistines to the exploits of the Sea Peoples, a mysterious confederation of tribes that, according to Egyptian and other historical sources, appear to have wreaked havoc across the eastern Mediterranean at the end of the late Bronze Age in the 13th century and early 12th century BC. Now, a study published in the journal Science Advances, prompted by the unprecedented 2016 discovery of a cemetery at the ancient Philistine city of Ascalon on the southern coast of Israel. This provides an intriguing look into the genetic origins and legacy of the Philistines. The research appears to support their foreign origin, but reveals that the rivaled outsiders were soon marrying into the local populations. This reminds me of when the fallen angels came down and came into the women that were there and saw that they were fair, and they had sex with them, and they spread their seed and mingled their seed. This kind of reminds me of that in the scripture. The study analyzed DNA from 10 sets of human remains recovered from the Ashkelon across 3 different time periods. So when they go down into the earth, they actually hit upon 3 different civilizations that were living. They go down and they find remains of houses and the architecture of those houses and the pottery, and from what they see and analyze, they can link it to a time period. And then if they go below that, they reach another foundation of historical ancestry, and that reveals something different. Now, this went down 3 different levels. This is what they're saying here. A study analyzed DNA from 10 sets of human remains recovered from Ashkelon across 3 different time periods. A middle late Bronze Age burial ground about 1650 to 1200 BC, which predates the Philistine presence in the area. So this is before they even come on the scene. Infant burials from the late 1100s BC, following the arrival of the Philistines in the early Iron Age, and individuals buried in the Philistine cemetery in the later Iron Age, 10th and 9th centuries BC. So those were the 3 time periods that they discovered through their archaeological dig. The 4 early Iron Age DNA samples, all from infants buried beneath the floors of Philistine houses, include proportionally includes more additional European ancestry in their genetic signatures. Wow, Rome is everywhere. Look at this. Rome is going down into the 3 levels of archaeology. It says here, additional European ancestry in their genetic signatures, roughly 14% than in the pre-Philistine Bronze Age samples, 2 to 9% according to the researchers. While the origins of this additional European ancestry are not conclusive, the most plausible models point to Greece, Crete, Sardinia, and the Iberian Peninsula. Daniel Master, who is a director of the Leon Levy expedition to Ashkelon and a co-author of the study, hails the results as, quotes, direct evidence, unquote, that supports the theory that the Philistines began as migrants from the west who settled in Ashkelon in the 12th century BC. Now, if they're coming from the west, that would be Egypt and Africa, because that is west of the Levant, right? It fits with the Egyptian and other texts that we have, and it fits with the archaeological material. What researchers find even more unusual is that this specific European blip disappears quickly and is statistically insignificant in the DNA from the study of the samples recovered from the cemetery at Ashkelon only a few centuries after the infant burials. So the later Philistine burials have genetic signatures very similar to local populations who lived in the regions before the Philistines showed up. We managed to catch this movement of people coming to Ashkelon from Southern Europe, says Michael Feldman, an archaeogenicist at the Max Planck Institute and study co-author. Quote, when it disappears very quickly within 200 years, probably because the Philistines intermarried and this kind of genetic signature was diluted within the local population, unquote. For more than a century, we have debated the question of where the Philistines came from, writes archaeologist Eric Klein in an email from his excavation at the Canaanite site of Tel Kabri. Now we have the answer. Southern Europe, and probably more specifically mainland Greece, Crete, and Sardinia. This fits with what had seemed the most likely answer previously, especially judging from the archaeological remains, and so this seems a logical finding. Aaron Meyer, an archaeologist who directs excavations at the Philistine city of Tel Es-Safi Gath, and who was not involved in the current research, he warns us against oversimplifying the story of the Philistines. However, calling the biblical villains an entangled or transcultural group consisting of peoples of various origins. While I fully agree that there was a significant foreign component among the Philistines in the early Iron Age, these foreign components were not of one origin. And no less important, they mixed with local Levantine populations from early Iron Age onwards, Meyer writes in an email. Now, I think this is where Daniel says the mixing of the iron and the clay, right? The clay to the west would be the brown people, the earthy people, right? And the iron would be the European people, wouldn't it? For Master, what's most interesting is the fact, despite the quick genetic assimilation that the Philistines underwent, they remained a distinct cultural group that was clearly identifiable from their neighbors for more than 5 centuries, until they were conquered by the Babylonians in 604 BC. Let's see. They were conquered by the Babylonians in 604 BC. So if these Philistines came from the west, which would have been Africa and Egypt, right? Cairo. Don't forget, in the War of 1967, the Jews seized a swath of land, which included that big piece coming from Africa, that big upside-down triangle. That was near Cairo, Egypt. There were Africans there. There were black Ethiopians there. There were Egyptians there. There were black people there. Seized by the Babylonians in 604 BC. Now we have to ask us, why in the United States is Hammurabi, who was a king of Babylon, is gracing the walls of our Congress Senate chamber, along with Maimonides and Moses. Oh, and one other too, Pope Innocent, who impaled everyone and tortured everyone in the Crusades. Why are these people in the United States White House on the walls? Why are these lawmakers, how have they, with the blood history that we read in the Bible, how is it that these people of torture and sacrificing children and impaling people have gotten into our White House and we have absorbed their law structure? You have to ask yourself that question. There are 23 portraits in the court chamber that the United States has extrapolated from their laws. That's why we're honoring them in our U.S. White House. These were horrible people. It might give us a clue of why United States tax dollars are being sent over to support the state of Israel. building all those mansions, bringing Jews from the United States over there so that they could live in the same kind of comforts they have over here, making it easy for them to make the transition. And where are they settling? They're settling on Palestinian land. And once they're there, how are you going to get them off? They're settling illegally. For Master, what is most interesting is the fact that despite the quick genetic assimilation that the Philistines underwent, they remained a distinct cultural group that was clearly identifiable from their neighbors for more than 5 centuries, until they were conquered by the Babylonians in 604 BC. It's kind of interesting how you see the Philistine genetic mix has changed so quickly, the archaeologists observed. Because if you were only relying on the Hebrew text, you'd think that nobody would want to mix with the Philistines, right? I'll be back with more. Thanks for watching.